All right, everybody, welcome back to the Leader Living Life podcast. Continue with our series of featuring veteran and law enforcement oriented charities and organizations. I'm super excited to have the guys here from Irreverent Warriors. I have to stand up and let everybody know I have my Irreverent Warriors silkies on today.
Excellent.
Specifically for this. Probably the most comfortable piece of clothing I own. So just, you guys can go check those out on their website. They're amazing. So with that, let's go ahead and you guys do an introduction. Nate, would you like to get us started?
Yeah, sure thing. I'm Nate McDonald, Marine Corps veteran. I got out in 2012. While I was noticed the issues with veteran suicide very early on in my my first tour. We had lost two or three of the people in our company back home, and we hadn't even lost anybody on deployment. So I was like, this is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I got out, obviously wanted to stay connected to the veteran and military community, and I work as a contractor for DoD, so I stayed in those circles and started just reaching out and doing what I could, whether it was a run here or a 5K there, whatever I could do to affect the cause of preventing veteran and military PTSD and suicide. And then I found Irreverent Warriors, and we'll talk all about this amazing organization, but it's been one of the most impactful organizations I've ever been a part of.
Oh, that's a great intro. Thank you, man. Dan?
I too am a Marine Corps veteran. I actually got out in 2005 as an air crewman on 53s and then later on H-60s. And I would love to tell you that my family as a whole was a stranger to suicide. I lost 3 friends in high school early. And then when I was in the Marine Corps, I had 3 friends attempt. Thankfully, they were not successful. But as I was developing, as a teenager and I was in the DEP program, my uncle was my biggest influence. He was a former Marine. We found out later, basically part of the formation of Marine Recon in Vietnam. So he had some interesting experiences, I'll say.
Sure.
But in 2005, he actually committed suicide. So that really hurt. And after I got out of the Marine Corps, I transitioned to be a police officer, moved on from that, and now I actually work for DoD myself. And kind of in that period of time, between being a police officer and working with DoD, I was bouncing around different things. I was in running groups and just couldn't find that niche. And then a couple good friends of mine took me out to my first hike in 2016. And I mean, from then on, I was immediately hooked with Irreverent Warriors.
That's great. Found
an immediate passion. And I mean, it was just like a sucking void was filled, if you will.
Yeah.
And so since then, I would agree with Nate. It has been so impactful for me personally, but also just hoping to impact as many veterans as I can as well. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the veterans that are listening, we don't have unique domain on suicide, but it affects us disproportionately in the population. I had one of my troops commit suicide after we got back. I can't even say his name. I'll edit that out.
No, it's all right, brother. Let that out.
All right, let me get my shit together. So, guys, tell me, a little bit more about the origin of the org. It seems like you guys came into something that already existed, and have obviously moved into leadership roles. Is that like a valid assessment or description?
Yeah. Dan, if you want to take the history there early on, you've been a part of Irreverent Warriors longer than I have. So.
Yeah. So I will say, as an organization, I will tell you in 2016, I was your average Joe hiker. And I had heard about it in the beginning, and the same friends that got me to finally go had been talking about it. And I, you hear it and you're like, oh, hey, I'll try to make it out if I can. But it did start in 2015. Donnie O'Malley started that. He also runs and is the founder of Vet TV as well. So a lot of people do know that as well. And after, like, when I started, and then in 2017, I had met Tom Jorts a little bit early. He was actually the DC coordinator at the time. DC has its own sad history with the coordinators, but Tom was running it and was trying to transition out. He was, going to move on and do some things. I kind of latched onto him a little bit, and then in 2018, I picked up the formal role as the coordinator. In that year, but yes, 2018 is when IW had a changeover at the president. So Cindy McNally is our president now. Prior to that, it was Jesse. And when that change occurred, Cindy wanted to really drive and start. I guess the best way to show this is, or I guess the best way to explain it is basically say she was just trying to drive a new positive based culture. And not that the previous culture was bad. I don't want anybody to think that. We started it out, and I think Nate would agree to this, and just say that it was raw. Honestly, it was a lot of Marines getting together, and Nate and I can attest to this. When that happens, man, it can be fun. I'll just say it can be fun, right? So, but Mama's experience and her past and her history as well with suicide, just understanding that culture, knew that, she wanted an all-inclusive environment.
Right.
She knew that this isn't just a Marine thing, even though that's where it started, and that's awesome. But that, we needed to get to every veteran that we possibly could. So that has driven a change, if you will, in the way we have to operate to be inclusive for all branches, all individuals. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And I think Nate can probably expand on that as well.
One thing, just an outside observation that I notice in like your Facebook group, Instagram, those types of things, is how many women are represented in the pictures. Mm-hmm. It's not, it isn't represented as a boys club.
Right.
It's represented as a soldiers club, so to speak. And I'm an Army guy, so we can get into the inner branch rivalry later. Yeah, no, I understand what you guys are saying.
Yeah, so from my perspective with the organization, I got my introduction actually by coordinating a hike. I assisted the coordination of the first hike in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Oh, cool.
And at the time I'd been there 4 or 5 years, was really tied into the veteran and military community there. So I was able to assist with coordinating that hike, and it was not what I was expecting at all. It was that was actually the one I coordinated was the second hike I attended. The first one being Jacksonville, North Carolina. If you know anything about the Marine Corps, there's a base there. Yeah. So my first Irreverent Warriors hike was, we had over 250, almost 300 fresh Marines, and a large contingent of active duty Marines, which is another animal to deal with in something like these hikes. So then we came to Fayetteville and did that hike, and it was just so rewarding. I thought it was going to be great for the organization, and I was going to help spread the word. And what I didn't expect was the immediate therapy that occurred at the event, the connections, the camaraderie. It was emotional, and Dan mentioned raw is a great word to express it. But people made fast friends, and you'd be walking along in the formation and talking to another one of your brothers and sisters, because it seems like your family when you show up. It's not, oh, hey, let me try to introduce myself. Like everybody just
you're part of the crew. Yeah.
So walking through the formation, and 5 minutes into talking to a guy, he's sharing some of his darkest moments in his entire life, and you're able to contribute to his therapy. And
Yep.
As a result, just being tied into that community and hearing that, of course, you share back, and the therapy is mutual. Unconventional therapy is what we're going for. My experience with therapy, it was such a bad word for me.
Right.
Just talking to everybody about it, because you hear therapy, especially in regard to PTSD, and you think of a kumbaya circle where a bunch of people get together and cry, you know, and
Right.
you're
It's
talking
not that
to,
at all.
or you're talking to a therapist one-on-one and trying to express your history, your experience as a veteran to somebody that doesn't comprehend what you're saying. They don't feel anything like what you're trying to express. They just
Right.
don't understand. Not to say that clinical therapy and psychology aren't beneficial. In many cases, they're extremely helpful.
Yep.
But there's a huge contingent of military and veteran individuals that just aren't going to go. They're not going to go to that medical or mental health professional to get help. But they'll go to a brother and have a beer, and suddenly it's a therapeutic event. So attended that hike. That's actually the Fayetteville hike is where I met Cindy. As Dan mentioned, she's the president of Irreverent Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
And she had, at the time, she was the national hike coordinator. And she was kicking butt in that job too. She was basically running the events across the nation. And we were talking and hanging out at an event post-hike, and she asked if I would help with other events. So we kind of chatted about how I could impact the organization, and then I still wasn't sure. And I think the biggest reason was just my experience at those first couple hikes. They were good experiences, and the events were great, but there was some growth, some maturity that I needed to see before I could throw myself in. And at the time, I was just introducing myself to Cindy and the organization. So I spent the rest of the year going to just about every hike I could possibly make it to. Ended up going to 10 or 12 hikes just throughout the year. And every hike, I just slid into a more involved role. And by the end of that year, Cindy would call me and see if I was going to a hike so she could introduce me to the coordinating staff, and I could help them with running the local event. So I just kind of, it became my organization just as much as it was Dan's or Cindy's or anyone else's. I wanted to make my impact. I wanted to help. So I just kind of started doing more and more. And then I would say it would probably be that August or September of that first year, Cindy asked if I'd take a leadership role in the organization. And proudest moment of my Irreverent Warriors career, maybe not so much, but I was like, yeah, absolutely not. Not gonna do it. I was like, I'm not qualified. There's more experienced people here. I'm one of the young guns. Like, no, I can't do that. And there was steps in the right direction, but once again, we still weren't where I could throw my name and reputation behind the organization and how it was running. And as Dan mentioned, that fall was also when Cindy took over being president. So we started talking on a weekly basis. She'd run things by me, and we were chatting back and forth, and she's like, we're on the same page with this culture and where the Irreverent Warriors culture needs to go, where our organization needs to grow. So we worked together, despite the fact that I just refused to take an actual position with the organization. I was doing all the work anyway. I just,
just couldn't get fired.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then I would say it was right around the new year. She reached out one more time, and she was like, you're my right-hand man. Like, I reach out to you on a near daily basis. Just do the actual job and that you're doing with a title. That would be great.
Yeah.
And I said no. And then about 24 hours later, after just thinking about my reasons for saying no, thinking about what I was doing with the organization and my investment level, I was like, Nate, you're being an idiot. Like, this is what you want. You want to be a part of this. And the title doesn't mean anything. You're going to do it regardless. So if you can support the organization better in an actual position, then do it. So I called her back and told her I'd help out. And so she made me Chief Operating Officer. And that title is kind of fluctuated as the organization has grown. But I think Dan would agree with this. Over the last year, 2019 was a huge year. It was ridiculous. We went from 20 something hikes in 2018 to 38 in 2019.
Oh, that's a big jump.
And this year, we were at near 60 before the COVID struck. So just it's skyrocketing, and it's not just the numbers or the events or the number of people that are showing up to the events, which is, that's all tangible impact for our mission. Every person that shows up to the event is important. So the numbers do matter to us.
Yeah.
All the events are great, but the more people we can get into
the
this
more you
family,
can touch.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nate, can I just ask
Yeah.
a quick question? And I apologize, I'm taking it way back here into the conversation. The active duty soldiers in the boots that participated with you guys, did you, what was their level of awareness around suicide among veterans, maybe before versus when they left? Did you feel like they came because they were kind of already plugged in a little bit to it, or was this really an eye-opening event for these guys?
I think it's an eye-opening event for just about everyone that attends. I don't know many people from when I served, the people that were close to me and served with me, that weren't aware,
Right.
that weren't touched by suicide or PTSD at some point in their careers.
Right.
But even the young guns that are coming in that maybe haven't been to war yet, like, as I mentioned, it's an eye-opening experience for everybody. But for those guys, I think it hits a little bit harder. We have when we have a demographic like that is very strong, junior enlisted, active duty. They come into it like it's a party, and trying to manage that dynamic as leadership can be interesting. It's ridiculous. But they'll go to their second hike or their third hike, and you can just see them mature through the process. They start to get it. They understand, oh, hey, if I chug out of this Jameson bottle walking down the street with this element, that's fun. And then their second event, after they've been chastised more than likely, they realize, oh, maybe this isn't about me getting wasted.
Right.
Maybe my actions are actually negatively impacting this mission that we're trying to accomplish. And that's it. They get that mission focus.
Yeah, and I think people eventually shift out of the me focus and into the we focus, right? So this is not to pull attention to myself, chugging out of my Jameson bottle and acting a fool. This is about everybody and my representation of that. And that comes with some maturity as leaders, and you guys have been through these transitions. This is a good event for them to start being part of it as opposed to just participating in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that culture change that we just talked about on such a micro level is happening across the nation at our events. And it's happened over a couple of years, and it's amazing to see. And as I was talking about the numbers earlier and how the hikes and the participation has increased and the outreach and our impact and just everything, but also our processes and our professionalism, our marketing efforts with Dan, public relations, every aspect of the organization is skyrocketing. And it's all due to the amazing people that are invested in each other.
And do you think that participants feel like it's less fun now that it's more professional, or are they starting to feel that it's now more valuable?
Go for it, Dan.
I think that individuals are experiencing what we are trying to really get to, and that's that actual deep bond with other veterans.
Good.
So, and I think that is making it fun, and at a different type of level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not taking away from the party atmosphere. There are certainly folks that come and they need to do that, and that's okay.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Right. And because we're not trying to limit how individuals need to express themselves, but we are trying to get just past that superficial level of,
Right.
hey, how you doing? And then I'll see you at another event, or maybe not. Right. No, we're actually trying to get folks to recognize that these folks can be your family and really are. And getting past that superficial bond. And I think a really good example of this, and it's such a small thing, but I know in 2018, between 2018 and 19, so last year's hike season, we really pushed on pace of hike. I think Nate was probably the champion of this, the most about pace of hike, pace of hike, pace of hike.
Yeah.
And I noticed it immediately from when my first DC hike to now, when we really started talking about pace of hike, how much more that contributed to the individuals to develop that bond.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was taking away from the me to establishing the we.
Yeah.
Because the individuals that could go really fast, they were chugging along, and they weren't paying attention to folks because they were so worried about not, being in last, right?
Right.
So when we started shifting the pace to, I wouldn't call it slow, but I would say it's what I would call a shuffle.
And more moderated. Yeah.
Right. But it allows you to have a conversation as you're moving.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're not so worried about, oh man, where's the front of the pack, or where's the rest of the hike? It's as you're just naturally conversating, before you know it, you're 3-4 miles into the thing, and you've just made like 10 best friends, and that's the point. So
how long are the hikes typically, Dan?
We strive to do, let's put it this way. The average is about 8 to 10 miles.
Mm-hmm.
There is no real hard limit, I'll call it. We do say don't go beyond that 12-mile, 14-mile piece, because then it just kind of gets a little too long. But it's really more of know your city, know your atmosphere, and what will work. How many stops will influence that. Time is a big factor in all of this. So it's really about pick a distance that works well in a time frame, and incorporate stops and things like that. So.
Our min max is 8. What we try to enforce, and it's situational, like Dan said.
Sure.
But the minimum is usually around 8 miles, with the max being 14. We have learned, just like pace, the distance and the weight and all that stuff that used to be a priority, it's almost a distraction from what we're trying to accomplish. So dialing all of that back, shortening the hike allows us to control the pace more. It allows the contingent of the hike, which is every hike, of the broken contingent, the guys that have just taken the wear and tear.
Sure.
We have 60, 70-year-old vets show up and hike with us. And we want them to feel just as much a part of the event as the hard charger up front that's toting 80.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like Dan said, every event, just like we have the guys that show up that just want to drink. We have the guys that are going to show up every event, and they're going to push the pace or attempt to. Takes strong hike leadership to control the element, for sure. But they'll be up in the front with a rucksack full of rocks, just trying to book. And those are the opportunities where Dan, myself, the other leaders in the organization have to pull these guys aside and be, hey, guy, why are you here? Mm-hmm. If you have all this energy and all this motivation, how about you go to the back of the element and talk to those guys that are struggling?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm thinking about the distance, to me, does weigh a little bit, in that it is a little bit reminiscent for, I think, a lot of us, even us old guys, of when we were in training.
Right.
And there's a certain connectedness that comes from mutual suffering, for lack of a better term. You know, when you all are going for a mile, like I could probably drink out of Jameson's bottle if I was going a mile, but going 8 miles or 9 or 10 or up to 14, there's a certain degree of reality where you've got to have your shit together if you're going to make it that distance. And I think that I love the idea of that, and how people who've been there, they get it right away. They remember, you know, graduate basic training, you had to do a 12-mile hike or whatever. So I think that that's a powerful part, that you guys are maintaining the integrity of the effort by keeping those numbers up a little bit. I think that's a pretty cool thing that you're doing, even though it's not the focus. It has an impact on getting to your focus by putting people together in a mutual effort to accomplish that.
Yeah. Now I will say though, this is that, but what we don't want to do, and we've expressed this a lot of time to folks, if that's a barrier for you to come to this event, we absolutely don't want you to perceive that as a barrier.
Sure, come do what you can.
Yeah, exactly. And we have the logistic capability to ensure that everybody finishes. So, you know, I understand, you know, folks may see that as a big barrier. Oh my gosh, you know, I haven't put a ruck on in, you know, umpteen years, and I haven't worn my boots in whatever years.
Or
it's
injuries
fine.
Or whatever, yeah.
Right. Trust me. I mean, even our founder, Donnie, has been out there in flip flops. I mean, it's okay. We would much rather have the individuals come and experience again that
Sure.
the interrelationships, the personal bonding. And I will tell you that one of the most exciting parts is that first hour or so before you actually start wrecking. Just that, you know, the smoking and joking at the very beginning is some of the best. I have some of the best stories just from that. So
that's great.
You know, even if you just stay for that's fine. Right. And then, you know, you go to the end or you meet us at the stops, that's okay. We much rather have that veteran there and present in whatever capacity they could be in than not come at all. So, yeah,
it's a great point. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit? I don't want to get a whole conversation on it here, because I'm sure they can find out from the website. For the veterans or the people that want to participate that do have injuries or wear and tear, can you just give them put them at ease a bit about the logistics of how you handle people being able to come in and out of that 8 to 14 miles?
Sure. Nate, you want to take that one, or you
want? No, go for it.
Okay. So the coordinators, when they are planning their routes, you know, we have guidance to them to, you know, identify areas of refuge, if you will. And then also, more importantly, have what we just are calling safety vehicles. Capacity, right? So what you'll typically find is that on a hike, you'll see, I don't want to call, well, I guess I can call it a squadron of vehicles.
Sure.
That support the hike. And you may see them, you may not, right? But they're there. And at any point in time, if an individual is moving and has to stop, or if they say, hey, you know, could I meet you guys at the next stop? Like, so say they have just come to the start and they're like, hey, I can't hike, but I'd really like to go to your next stop. That coordinator and the coordinating support element, you know, they have their map, they have all their stop locations identified. The hike coordination crew itself has comms as they're hiking. So, and they're strategically placed throughout the hike so that if somebody falls out in the middle, back, whatever, that's covered. And typically what you'll see is some sort of identification for these individuals too, so that folks know, hey, that's a coordinator, that's the volunteer, that's the this, that's the that. So we do emphasize and place a lot of attention to that aspect of logistics. So if folks, you know, show up, have questions, there is a team typically a sizable team to answer any questions and give any guidance or shortcuts, if you will, so that folks can, come in and out of the hike as they can.
Yeah. So the big part of the message is just show up.
Right.
We'll make it work.
Yep.
It's more important that you're there than worried about that type of stuff. So, tell me about like where are you guys headed with the organization? I know you're in a big shift in culture, and what's the direction of your mission? Is it to continue to grow the hikes? Because that's awesome growth, by the way. Obviously COVID-19 derailed you a bit, but it derailed all of us, right? So like what's next? Like where are you going with this?
So our next hike, the first hike of the COVID era, is June 13th in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yep.
And we were just talking about logistics and the amount of planning that goes into these events. And all that's occurred with COVID, as soon as we can get back on the streets, we're going to.
Yeah.
And we'll follow whatever guidance we need to. It's just going to take a lot more work to plan. So we're going to be splitting the element into like 30-person units, and then have armbands to identify different groups, swap armbands to move between the different formations. So we're just doing all of the responsible things we can to be respectful of the guidelines that the local government feels is necessary. As far as the first part of that question, where we're going as an organization, I think the evolution of the organization has been fantastic. And as much as COVID has really sucked for all of us,
well said.
I mean, you have an organization that's whole intention. The anchor of our mission statement is bringing veterans together. And yet we just got hit by a virus that mandates social distancing.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is really personal.
Yep.
It came after us. But what it has done is it's strengthened our community outside of the hikes. And that's another one of my primary concerns when I came on with the organization. It was, okay, we have a hike, and the hikes are amazing and they're therapeutic, but that's one day out of a year. Right. What happens to the guys that can't travel around the nation and attend all these events? So that's when we really got focused on growing our social media presence. I made sure that I was working with at the time I was in charge of social media, but since then working with Lewis, who is now our social media director, and we're making sure that all of these local communities, the Irreverent Warriors communities, have a Facebook group. And that maintains that connection, or at least that ability, that contact mechanism throughout the rest of the year. And I think that's huge. This community, our organization, the therapy and camaraderie needs to continue. It needs to transcend the hikes.
Yep,
hikes
agreed.
are a fantastic event, but we need to grow past that. And COVID has almost mandated that. So now we have people reaching out on social media, doing Zoom chats and live chats and all these amazing things. And we were forced to grow outside of the hikes. And it's something we were talking about the whole time. And then, it just got thrown into our laps. So
it was no longer an alternative. It became the only option. I did notice that that there's been, I believe, some Facebook Lives off of the Irreverent Warrior site. And that's a pretty cool thing to do.
Yeah. Do them every Thursday.
Every Thursday? Cool. Now I know when to get that on my schedule. So for the listeners out there, what can they do to help you guys? Like, where are your needs that people can help you drive this mission forward and make it sustainable?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, one of the most important things to myself and Dan and Cindy, the rest of the core leadership of Irreverent Warriors, is marketing. It's not for the purpose of, hey, we want to be the most popular or well-known veteran organization, but it's what we were talking about before. The wider our reach is, the more people find out about this network and become a part of it, the more people are being impacted by it. So our marketing, our publicity, directly impacts our effectiveness. So I think that's one of our primary concerns.
Yeah. So I don't know why this question didn't come to me earlier, but so for people that are not military veterans, but would like to be part of this, is there any reason why they shouldn't sign up and come to a march or to a hike?
Well, the hikes itself are actually for veterans, active duty, reserve
Mm-hmm.
guard, and even foreign service officers.
Okay.
But absolutely, non-veterans can come. They do have to, be in a volunteer capacity.
Yep.
However, I could give you story upon story upon story of volunteers who have. Well, I'll put it this way. I had a volunteer at my hike in DC who was our safety fairy. It's a thing we kind of have fun with. Somebody that carries around sunblock and all that stuff, right?
Nice.
She, at the very end, she came up and she goes, I didn't realize how much I needed this, just experiencing something like this. And she said it made it all worth it at the very end when she's watching folks, hugging each other. And it just, it just, so I say that for the purpose of absolutely that is certainly need. We need volunteers. We couldn't do it without our volunteers, to be honest. So if folks are seeing a city that they're near or live in and they want to help and support us in that manner, please reach out. We absolutely can use that help.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Nate.
Yeah. And of course, goes without saying, running an organization is not cheap, especially with the way we're trying to grow, with our marketing efforts, growing our web store, getting our website developed. There's so many efforts that we've never been about raising funds. We're not very good at it, honestly, but we're working on it. We know that the more support we get financially, the more we're going to be able to do as an organization. So, I mean, that's another way. Go to www.irreverentwarriors.com. We have our web store there. The proceeds go directly to supporting our mission. We have a completely volunteer staff. And then we have a donate button there. You can go to commit change and sign up to be one of our annual donors, or just do a one-time donation. So, I mean, obviously financially, and then just marketing and supporting the organization is incredibly important. And
and I'll ask all of our listeners. We've got listeners in almost 20 countries, over 200 cities. So we've got people that are hearing us. I'm going to encourage them, guys, go listen. If it's $5, whatever it is, go and throw a donation into the kitty, and don't be afraid to reach out and volunteer your time. If you're not a veteran, go help make these events great for the veterans that, both Nate and Dan have emphasized the therapeutic aspect of what they're doing.
And just to go back real quick, Eric, I wanted to kind of address that because that's been something that we've had misunderstanding from outside the organization. And they see when they hear we only allow veterans and military to hike in our events, they don't really know the why behind that. And I think that's a very important distinction. It's not we're trying to be elitist. You haven't earned the right to hike with us. It's the fact the therapy you just mentioned doesn't occur in the normal world, in normal gatherings with the public. And the reason is because we don't feel that comfort level that you get in that closed veteran and military environment. We wouldn't have husbands opening up and bawling on a young gun's shoulder if his wife and kids were standing next to him. It just wouldn't happen.
Not going to go that way.
So that environment, maintaining that sanctity for the people, having that, I don't want to call it really a safe space because that's a really lame term, but it is that though. I mean, you feel like you can say almost anything. The things that you can't say for any other place in your life.
And I think veterans have their own vernacular, our own language.
Sure.
That, we know what someone's saying, even though they're not saying it in a way that some of our civilian counterparts would understand. And that's okay. That's not exclusionary on the civilians in our life, but sometimes we need to talk amongst ourselves and just kind of handle some business. So yeah, I get that. And hopefully people understand that's not intended to push them off. But the other thing I hope is that people who've only had casual exposure to organizations like yourself and Donnie with Vet TV and some of the other orgs, a big part of what I'm trying to do with this series, they kind of see the humorous soundbite or Facebook ad, and they without digging deeper are missing what the mission is. So they see your young boot with his Jameson's bottle and his Silkies, and that becomes the picture they have of what this is about, and that's not what it's about at all. Now, is that a component of it? Sure. I mean, it's fine, by the way, and that's all right. But there's way more depth to your mission and what you're doing in the veterans community that I hope that listeners will take some more time and explore that with you guys and find ways to help you out. So I appreciate you guys digging into that stuff as much as, it is fun. I mean, let's be honest. It is fun.
It is.
But anyway, so cool. So is there anything else you guys would like to share with our listeners that I didn't think to ask or that we didn't get to cover in enough detail?
I mean, maybe just to add to your last statement, I think, the reality is if you go to these hikes, and I absolutely encourage anybody listening, even if you're not going to go, tell somebody else, tell another veteran about the organization. And when you get there, we just ask, come with an open heart, open mind, and a pair of Silkies. But that's no. But I mean, be open.
Yeah.
The very nature of the Silkies isn't just to look silly. It's actually a symbol of you being open and vulnerable and being willing to come and talk to your brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Because I'm tired of losing them. So.
Yep.
So Dan was mentioning Call Sign Silkies, which is our live that we do every Thursday night, and had the pleasure of being on there with him last night. We had a great time. I was in a tuxedo man romper, by the way, with an American flag bow tie. So you have that to look forward to. But one of my biggest emphasis points during that communication was taking ownership of our situation. And it was a personal challenge to the veterans in our group, to the veterans anybody that was hearing. And it was, take care of yourselves, get off the couch, eat a healthy meal, do the right things to take care of yourself. And the hikes, being a part of this organization, it's another aspect of taking care of yourself.
Agreed.
We're giving people an opportunity to do. And one of the reasons why we emphasize we're not about awareness. We aren't. And it's not because nobody knows about the 22. It's for us, it doesn't stop there.
Right.
Sure, awareness is a part of it. People need to understand the severity of this issue. But we're not just knowing about it. We're doing something about it. And creating this network, giving people the outlet to experience this unconventional therapy and be a part of this family. Sometimes all it takes to get that person to put the gun back on safe and put it away is to know that somebody gives a shit if they stay alive.
Yep. And I think one of the things, because just thinking about the routine of the hikes as you guys get back on track, and COVID-19 gives us a break from this shit. There's a thought in your head that you're like, I'm going to this thing. I don't want to be embarrassed by my inability to keep up or to complete it. And so there's this positive influence greater than the hike for people that participate in them. It does motivate you to maybe eat a little healthier, drink a little less, get out and exercise a little bit. There is, I think, a deeper, it's more than the event. It's being ready for the event, I think, is also a really therapeutic thing because it gives a mission. And all us veterans, man, we're wrapped up in having a mission. So I think what you guys are doing, even from that aspect, is still pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's amazing. One of the powerful things about this organization, the most powerful thing, is the people. You're going to show up to an event with 300 veterans, and you'll have something in common with many of them.
Yeah.
But I promise you, you're going to meet one or two people in that formation, whether it's a similar experience, a similar trauma, similar history. You're going to meet the people that are your medicine, your personal medicine. And having us, the veteran and military community, involved in each other's lives, taking responsibility to have each other's backs, that's the power of our community.
Yeah, and to be able to have something to focus on, to lift yourself out of yourself and focus on helping someone else. Because it's easy when you're isolated to be so absorbed in PTSD and all these other things, that to get out there and meet someone who you're like, wow, man, I could really give this man or woman a hand here. And all of a sudden you forget about yourself and you're consumed by now giving. So there's just so many positive things around it. So love what you guys are doing. So how do they find you, follow you? How do they stay connected to what's going on with you guys?
Sure, we have a few different ways they can accomplish that. The first thing I would encourage everyone to do is go to our webpage. It's www.irreverentwarriors.com. We have an about page that tells you all about the leadership in the organization and the history, what our mission is about and what we're trying to accomplish. We have our event page, is the home page on the website. So you go there, you're going to see all of the cities we're doing hikes in. And of course, there's links to our store and to donate. But the other thing that happens when you go to our website is it comes up with a ticker, a little submission opportunity to subscribe to our newsletter. And we'll be sending out monthly updates in our newsletter, along with like discount codes to our store and some other fun stuff. But so newsletter, our website, and then of course our social media. We are going to have a social media group of some sort in your area, I promise. We have hundreds across the country. And find our national groups. We have the Irreverent Warriors page, and then we have an Irreverent Warriors Instagram. It's Irreverent_Warriors. And we also have the closed group that we do the lives on for call sign Silkies. And that's just our Irreverent Warriors group instead of page. That's specifically tailored towards our veterans and military. Those are the people we encourage to join that closed group, ask you to answer a few questions, agree to terms and conditions. And it it's not the same, of course, as the exclusivity in that hike element, but it gives people a little bit more of an opportunity to open up to each other.
And that's the call sign Silkies?
Yeah, that's where we do call sign Silkies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a closed Facebook page.
And what's it called?
It's Irreverent Warriors.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a closed group, and then we have our public page as well, which is
okay.
So.
Awesome.
Yep, and you can find our group through the page. Okay.
Well, guys, this has been really informative, but like super interesting, quite a bit on the emotional side. And I appreciate that you guys carved time out on, it's almost 7:00 on a Friday night. You guys have families and other people in your life to spend time with besides me, but I do appreciate that you did spend time with my listeners. And for the listeners, please go visit these guys, pitch in a little bit, give them a hand. They're doing great work here for the veterans community. So with that, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And we'll see you all soon.